Okay, so creativeLIVE asked me to do some cake decorating for the holidays, and I thought about this a lot. Cupcakes are so hot right now. Everybody loves a cupcake. And cookies are also the #1 item that people enjoy at Christmas time. 67% of those surveyed said their most memorable thing about the holidays are the cookies. So, cookies is the next focus, okay? So I want to quickly touch on what I've done so far as cookies go. One is I showed the cookie that is like this. Is that good for you to see? Okay. What I've done is I've made a cutout cookie, and then I've used that same cookie cutter in order to do the actual work. These are a little bit time consuming, but they're not difficult, okay? That's kind of the cool thing about all this stuff. The other thing about these particular types of cookies is then if I want to package them up, put a little bow on it, I now have a gift or a little present that I can send home with every child at the party or put onto everybody's package, and it makes it just a little bit more special. Did these angels for a church function, and we did all types of hair color on them and that sort of thing. We kind of had fun with that. The other thing about the cookies that we can do the fondant that making them a little easier is that I literally just cut out the shape, the same shape that I did my cookie. And in this case, I used my holly cutter. And then I just put green fondant on it with some red colored balls. And it is like playing with Play-Doh. So let's get started on some. I lost where my space was. There we go. I have it so carefully set up there. I can't lose that. So the first thing I want to talk about the cookies is that you want to roll them out about 1/8 of an inch to 1/4 inch thick. I just kind of guesstimate when I'm doing them because I've done so many of them. But if that's an issue for you, go ahead and use like wooden dowels and roll out between the wooden dowels to keep your cookie dough all the same level. The other thing that you want to remember about cookie dough is that it's a delicate thing. You don't want to add so much flour to it that you're creating little bricks, okay, or something that's really hard. So you take the dough out of the bowl, you gently knead it so that it's workable, add a little flour underneath and a little flour on top so it doesn't stick to your rolling pin and your board, roll it out, cut your pieces, and then generally what I do is I just then have my leftover pieces and I add some fresh dough to that and then roll that out. I don't ever throw anything away. I have lots of children. They'll eat anything. So, well, not always, but sometimes. So that's basically the cookies. And I do bake on parchment. I find that baking on parchment, I get a better finished cookie. You can see the bottoms aren't brown. Although that's not to say that I don't have issues. You can see that one's a little browner. But even then, this one did some funky things on top. It's because I rolled out my cookies and then I let them sit for several hours before I baked them because I went in and cooked dinner and had dinner and got back to them much later. And it just did something funky. But I'm going to decorate it. It won't matter. It'll taste good. It'll be fine. Okay, now then on to cupcakes real quick. For the class, I've just done white and chocolate. Those are, you know, very standard, very basic, very regular. The one thing I wanted to bring up about cupcakes is that there are now all kinds of, this is a gold, this is silver, these are fancy decorated, it says holiday sweets on the bottom, it's got a little pattern on it. There are now all kinds of papers out there and cupcake cups that you can use. I have found that decorating or making a chocolate cake in one of these fancy ones is just a total waste. And they're a little pricey, so you know, you don't want to really waste that. So if I'm doing chocolate, I'm doing chocolate in either just a plain old white, or I like putting them into the foil, or the gold are very pretty too, okay? And you can, you know, every store in the world sells these. The white or the lighter colored papers or cake look great with the papers, and that's kind of an added thing. They also sell little paper wraps that you can wrap on these. They're very pricey, but if you're doing a special event, it's appropriate. If you're putting them on the table for friends and family, maybe you don't want to go to that expense. I don't know. It's up to you. It's your friends and family, you know, how important are they? Okay, the other thing about these particular cupcakes, or cupcakes in particular, is that they're just plain. Now, if I wanted to fill them with something like a cream filling, or a Bailey's, or a Grand Marnier, or chocolate ganache, I mean, whatever your imagination is, you can do that. It's very simple. You just want to take a tip that has a plain opening and just basically poke it in and squish icing in there or filling. And you can do creams, anything your little heart desires. It does not take much. Don't try to fill that little cupcake full of a half a cup of filling. Yes?
Do you do that when they're hot so that they will make room for the icing?
I wouldn't do it when they're too hot, because then you're looking at melting things. So if you're using like a whipped cream or a meringue-based buttercream or something, if you put it in too hot, it's just going to melt and then get kind of gooky. You're better off waiting until they're a little bit cool.
Okay.
Yep. That was a good question. And you don't have to do it every time. I mean, I do cupcakes all the time and do nothing but decorate them, and people still enjoy them. So that was just a couple of different things. And I also included on the website, the connection, the white cake recipe. I always like to call that worth the price of the book. I bought a very expensive, very high-end pastry book, and that recipe alone was worth it. And I've had students who have managed to ruin all kinds of things, but they're able to pull that recipe off every time. So that's one of those good recipes. A good white recipe, a good white cake recipe is a little difficult. But again, use whatever you are happy with, and if that means opening a box of cake mix and stirring it up, do it. It's okay. Okay.
Quick question.
Yeah.
Just curious myself, on that recipe, regular flour and cake flour, or one or the other?
Right off the top of my head, I'm not remembering what the recipe calls for.
Okay, well, I'll check it out.
Yeah, I was going to say, sorry. I want to say it's just standard baking flour. It might be cake flour. I apologize, I'm not remembering what it calls for.
No, that's okay.
Too many formulas. Okay, so the first thing I want to start with today is making a few little pieces of our cookies and cupcakes ahead of time, because the cool thing about fondant is it does work like Play-Doh, but unfortunately, it doesn't hold up as well as Play-Doh, okay? But if we let it sit, it will dry and hold its shape. So we need to make some shapes. So the first cupcakes or cookies that we're going to talk about are the sunflower. And I don't know what to call this one. It's just an orange flower. My yard's growing little orange flowers with brown centers, and I thought, okay, I'm calling that a fall flower. I don't know what it's called, though. And then also our poinsettia. Now, in order to do that, we need to have petals, okay? And to make our petals, I'm going to start with the yellow. You can use whatever color you want. When we work with our gum paste, excuse me, not our gum paste, but our fondant, or our gum paste, you have to knead it. Fondant needs to be kneaded, okay? The other thing I need to tell you is that when you work with fondant or gum paste, and I'll tell you what the difference is here in a moment, this will tell you if you have clean hands or not. This will tell you if you're wearing clean clothes or not. This will tell you if your counter is clean. It will pick up every little piece of fuzz and dirt in wherever you're working. So you have to be sure that you're clean when you're working with it. The other thing is I've provided, my little container's kind of broken, but that's okay. A little bit of shortening. This is just for my ladies in the UK, a little bit of white fat. They'll know what that is. I want just a little bit, and I always like to give this example. Fondant needs to be kneaded, and if we work in a little bit of shortening with it, it's like having a nice warm bubble bath and a glass of wine. And if you have too much wine, you're going to slip under the water and drown. So not too much wine, just a little bit, okay? My non-drinkers don't get that, but.
We had a quick question regarding if you could talk about the differences between fondant and gum paste.
Okay, fondant and gum paste. I can take my fondant, and that formula was included on the website also, and this has sugar and gelatin and shortening and glucose and glycerin and egg whites and gum. There are several types of gum, and I brought examples. One is tritarachon gum. Is that how you say it? I don't know how you say it. I'm not good at saying it. This is a natural gum, and when I open my containers, sometimes it's green, sometimes it's brown, sometimes it's gray. I have a big container that I bought a while ago that when I opened it, they could have smelled it a block away. It was that pungent. And I kind of shy away from it. There are decorators out there that they will only use a natural gum. I prefer to use what's called CMC, or also sodium bicarbonate cellulose, and that is a food grade gum. And the thing that I like about it is that, number one, it doesn't take as much product as the natural gums, and it's always white, it always has no odor, it always works exactly the way the last package worked. I'm not dealing with the natural product that's coming from who knows where that week. You know what I'm saying? That is the gum in there that makes it a fondant. When we add extra gum into our fondant, that makes it into a gum paste. Another gum paste formula is very simple. Basically, it's egg whites, powdered sugar, and gum. And your gum paste is the same thing as your Altoids mints, your Nico wafers, your sweetheart candies. I always like to tell people Altoids mints are somebody's gum paste that went horribly wrong and now they're wealthy. But you know, so that's gum paste. Now the gum paste, when we're working with the gum paste we can work much thinner than fondant, and it dries very quickly. And it gets really hard. So when we're done with it, it looks like porcelain. Now, my poinsettias that I have here, those are out of gum paste. And I can color it, I can paint it, I can airbrush it. I wire them so that I can have total control over where the petals are going. All of the berries and holly, that's all gum paste. So it's a lot like, it's like working with Play-Doh in many ways, but it will dry and look like porcelain when we're done. And it's edible. So we can do really, really outrageous, fun, awesome things with it.
Someone had asked where you can purchase the CMC. Do you have the resources for that?
CMC, I would say Global Sugar Art, and that link was also provided. And did I provide another link that sells it? I'm not, yeah, Global Sugar.
That's a good starting point. We'll go from there.
Yep.
Thank you.
Global Sugar Art is awesome. They have everything from everybody. And his shop is much like a warehouse, except that it's a shop. And then he has people that shop for their online orders, and then they ship out every night. So things go out very quickly. So if you ever need anything in a rush. Okay, so what I want to do is, I've kneaded this, loved it to death at this point. I am going to use a pasta machine. Yes, Kathy?
Is it possible to over-knead it?
Yes, it is. But it's more likely that you're going to under-knead it. Yeah. But you'll know, if it starts getting kind of droopy and sloppy, you've over-kneaded it. If you're in a high humidity area or a warm area, it's easy to do that. If it gets too sticky, you can knead in either a little more powdered sugar to it or a little cornstarch. You can put a little cornstarch on your hands or your work surface. Cornstarch is going to make it dry faster and crack easier. Your shortening is going to make it slow down on its drying and cracking. So it's kind of a happy balance you have to find for it. Okay, I'm going to use my pasta machine, and my pasta machine goes from 1 to 6. So 1 is my thickest number and 6 is my thinnest. And I'm going to work, actually I'm not going to use my pasta machine. I don't know what I'm thinking. Okay, senior moment, never mind.
Hey,
Darn.
quick question.
Okay.
Mikhail Love asks about fondant. Do you buy it or do you make it yourself?
I make it myself, but you can purchase it. And there are several brands out there. Satin Ice is one of them that's very, very nice. There's Fondex. There's all kinds of brands out there. And there's all kinds of formulas for it out there. There are some that are very, very complicated. There are some that are very simple. I prefer the one that I put on the internet, which has got the glucose and the glycerin and the gelatin and the egg whites. It's a very, very nice fondant. And it's very affordable to make, actually. Yeah, a little more expensive to buy, but more affordable to make.
And flavorful, the taste?
You can flavor it any flavor you want.
Oh,
and
cool.
fondant, ladies, this is what is actually the center to our cream-filled chocolates. So if you want to make this, flavor it whatever flavor you want, roll it into balls, dip it in chocolate, or hand roll it, you have cream-filled chocolate. That's it. They're filled with fondant. They're also filled with buttercream that's thickened up. So our chocolatiers and our confectioners, we all kind of play together. Okay, so what I've done is I've just kind of rolled out a little sausage, and I'm going to take my spatula, which is a palette knife. I like it because it's got a thin blade and it's sharp. And I'm just going to cut a few of these into various sizes. Doesn't matter, okay? I don't want them too big because I don't want giant, giant petals. And I'm just going to roll it into a ball. How simple is this? You guys know the ball, the sausage, you got it? And then at one end of that, I'm going to thin it out to a point. So I have a little teardrop shape. And then I'm going to press it so I have a petal shape. Is this too hard for you? Okay, and then I'm going to take my spatula or my whatever tool you have, and I'm going to add some veins to it. They also sell veiners, but you don't have to have a veiner. I have a veiner tool. The black tools are gem tools. I like them, they're good. And this is a veiner tool, so you can, instead of using a knife or a spatula, you can use the veiner tool. You can have all kinds of tools, or you can have very little. I didn't give you guys a veiner tool, you have to use your spatula. I break them. And the owner of Gem, she always says, you do what? Nobody breaks them. I'm the only one in the world who breaks them. I break them all the time. I push too hard on them when I'm making daisies. Okay, so what I want to do for my little sunflower cupcake is I want to make about 8 or 9 petals. I like having my petals have a little point on them, so if you get a point, great. If you don't, pull one out. And then at the end, I want to give it a little pinch. See how I give it a little pinch so it has that little petal leaf shape? And then I'm going to give it a little turn so it has some movement and life to it. And then I'm going to put it over here in my fancy tool, also known as an empty egg crate. These are great because you know what? They're food grade, number one. Number two, I can use and fill many of them. And then the next thing that I can do, because I do a lot of this, I can airbrush and color right in this thing. When this gets too ugly, I just recycle it. And we're watching out for our environment, so we recycle, reuse, you know, keep things going good. So what we're going to do now, how are you guys doing over there?
Not as well as you.
I'm hearing it way too quiet.
Trying to focus.
A lot of times some of this stuff is like watching paint dry, guys, so, you know. So again, we're making a little ball, we're turning it into a teardrop, we're crushing it with our finger or our thumb. I'm going to add some veining in there using either my little veining tool or your spatula or a butter knife, whatever tool you have available. The plastic knife from Starbucks, if you're in the coffee shop. Yes?
What did you say to do if it gets too sticky and limp?
If it gets too
Mine is kind
sticky,
of like
put in a little cornstarch or a little powdered sugar. Now on everybody's table I have a big bag of powdered sugar, and I have little I put my cornstarch, you use just a little bit of cornstarch. It's really easy to go too heavy on the cornstarch and that will make it crack. And so I usually put mine in like a little knee-high stocking, okay? Tie in some cornstarch on a little knee-high stocking, you just kind of puff it onto your hand. The health department is cool with the knee-high stocking as long as that's all it's ever used for. So you don't want to use your, don't use knee-high stocking on your foot one day and then it's a corn puff the next, okay?
Lucinda, from the internet, how long can you keep your self-made fondant?
Your self-made fondant will last easily 6 months, if not longer. The big trick to keeping your fondant is keeping it from drying out. It can be refrigerated, it can be frozen, it can be stored on your counter. You just need to wrap it in plastic. The trick to keeping it long term is wrap it in 2 or 3 things of plastic. Give it a coat of shortening first before you put it in. Put it in the bag with some plastic, seal it in there real good, and then if you seal it into an airtight container, that'll help keep it longer. Yep.
Thank you.
And you can flavor that any way you want. That's the other neat thing. So I flavor mine to go along with my cake flavors. You could flavor it according to what the color is. I mean, whatever your little heart desires, you know. For each cupcake, you're going to want about 7 to 9 petals. Did I already say that? For each cupcake, each cookie. Now, here's the cool thing about these particular flowers is I've done them on cupcakes, but truthfully, they can also go on cookies. I actually did one on a cookie. I like how my hands are shaking. Can you guys all see how much my hands are shaking?
Can I ask what you use to flavor the fondants?
I just use any type of flavoring that I have. It doesn't require any special flavor.
Like extracts and that
Yeah,
kind
just
of
any
thing?
extract.
Okay.
I like using a really high quality clear vanilla. And I use clear because then it doesn't change the color of my things. And because I do a lot of things for wedding cakes, keeping my colors pure and clean is very important. It's hard to match colors for weddings if you've got it muddied up with something else. Okay, so once you get several of these petals made for the yellow, yes. I'm going to try to remember people's names, but if I don't, forgive me.
Do you add the flavoring at the mixing stage of the fondant, or
Yes.
do you add it later after it's?
It's actually part of the mixture measurements.
Okay.
So when you're making fondant, it calls for 3 tablespoons of water, and in that 3 tablespoons of water, you're supposed to also include your flavor that you're choosing. And if you are using glucose, 3 tablespoons of water is really good. Now, if you don't have glucose, because glucose in some areas is a little more difficult to find, corn syrup, you can use corn syrup, just cut back on your moisture. So instead of using 3 tablespoons of water, you'd like maybe only use 1.5 tablespoons, because corn syrup has a lot more water in it than glucose. Same goes if you're using egg whites as opposed to meringue powder. Cut back on your moisture. But do it in that portion that you're measuring. Don't do it in your gelatin, okay? And your gelatin, you want me to talk to you about gelatin for a minute? If you're a pastry student or you're doing any type of baking, gelatin is a very important ingredient for those of us in the pastry industry and the cake decorating. And gelatin is always bloomed in cold water. You let it sit for a few moments and bloom. It doesn't matter if you're using sheet or powder. I prefer to use a powder gelatin when I'm making my fondant and gum paste. But there's other formulas out there that sheets are nice. Sheets are great for decorating gingerbread houses. They make great windows. But you bloom it in the cold water, let your sheet soften up, let your powder bloom, and then you melt it over very warm water. Or you melt it on warm. So you do it on a low burner or over a double boiler or something like that.
I have a couple of questions.
Okay.
A couple more questions.
Okay.
A couple of people, one person was asking if you have ready-made fondant. Can you add flavors to that? And
You
how
bet.
might you do that?
You can add flavors to that. Most of them come flavored vanilla. Fondex, he's now selling bold colors with bold flavors. So like it already comes flavored. Trying to think what one of the flavors are. Hot pink, I think, is flavored raspberry. Okay. And again, you just need to use an oil. If it's already pre-made, an oil works a little better because then it doesn't thin it out too much. But you can add just about any flavor you want to it.
Okay.
If it thins it out, just knead in a little powdered sugar.
Okay. And then somebody was also asking about how you would add color to the fondant.
Color's the same way. We're just going to knead it in.
Okay.
And be
All right.
prepared for your hands to be a mess. The thing that's going to take the see, my class, I've very nicely taken care of you guys. I've already colored all of your fondant, right? And then I went to the nail salon and had my nails done so you couldn't see all the blue and black that was in them. So
Do you wear gloves sometimes?
I don't wear gloves because, number one, I have an allergy to latex, so I have an issue with wearing gloves. And number two, the gloves, when you're working with the gloves and fondant, it sticks to it, and I can't tell what the consistency is. So I don't. If you want to, you can. I've had students that wear gloves all the time, and you know they work with it. But there's a certain tactile experience that you're getting by wearing, feeling where you're at with your fondant. Okay, now I've changed to the orange, so I'm going to do some orange petals. You guys working fast enough to keep up here? Sure. Sure. Okay. Yeah. Right.
Lucinda, quick question. Cookie Jar would like to know for any tips on working on fondant in tropical climate. Says, I made a cake once and the fondant melted off. And do you find that here in Seattle we have a better or worse as far as our climate is concerned as far as this type of art?
Well, we're pretty wet in this area too. Our wet is not as warm, of course. Dang. But my suggestion would be to work with more powdered sugar in it, and then also maybe a little more cornstarch. The cornstarch puff might be to her advantage. And she probably wants to stay away from the shortening altogether.
Great. Thank
I
you.
assume it's a she. That was very bold on my part. I apologize.
Cookie Jar could go
Cookie
either
jar
way. I
could
think.
go either way, yeah. He or she, whomever. And the cool thing about fondant is basically its origin is from Australia. So they worked the fondant in Australia. That's where it came from. England has just started using fondant within I'll say within the last 20, 30 years. Those of us in the States, it's very new to us. When we brought in an Australian decorator to show us how to do gum paste and fondant back in 1983, we couldn't give it away. We snuck it onto people's cakes. And I remember the first time somebody showed up at my doorstep and they had literally a piece of cake in their hand that had some of the fondant work that I had put onto the cake, and they said, "Did you do this?" And I remember thinking to myself, "Oh no, I'm going to get sued. Here it comes." And I thought about lying. I really did. I stood there for several seconds and thought, do I lie and say, no, I've never seen this before? And finally I decided, fess up, and I said, yeah. And they go, "Will you do our wedding cake?" And I thought, yes, it's finally happening. I can charge money for it. And now, of course, everybody wants it because they've seen it on TV and
For the Ace of Cakes and
the Ace
those
of
shows,
Cakes and yeah.
A question on like what you guys are working on right now. If you're making these for a party, how long would you let the petals sit before putting the cupcakes out? Like, is it supposed to be hard or kind of soft, or like,
I
what's
want
the...
it, yeah, I want it firm enough to be able to decorate my cupcakes, so it's going to take a few minutes for it to become firm enough. In our area, where it's humid, it's going to take a little longer, and it's raining today, so it's going to take even a little longer. In some place like Arizona or Australia or or maybe Denver, where it's not as wet, it's dry, it's cold, it's not going to take very long. You're talking maybe 30 minutes before they're ready to stick on. And I can make these days ahead of time and then set them out for my party. Because what's happening is that when you decorate a cookie or a cupcake or a cake and you're putting the icing and the sugar on it, you're essentially preserving that cake. That's what the whole purpose is to preserve the cake. And that's why the Australians and the English came up with this method, because they make the fruit cake and they work for weeks on their cake. Americans, we like to do it and have it, you know, through the McDonald's drive-thru as fast as they can produce it for us. I'm veining my orange ones. I don't have to, but I am. You don't have to vein any of these, actually. They could all be plain petals. They still look cool. So Americans have kind of, we're taking a little longer to do our work than we used to. We used to always spit everything out. That's why buttercream was so good for us, because it's fast and easy, and it's fatty. And Americans love fat. The English love sugar, and the Americans just love fat. So I see another question coming. No.
We do have a couple of more questions. One person says, fondant hugs a cake but sits on top of cookies and cakes. How do you attach it to the cookie or cake?
We're going to attach it with buttercream. I like to put my nice tasty buttercream on top. Number one, it adds that flavor that us Americans love, the fat. I just said that, right? and the other thing is that it keeps our cookie moist and adds a nice little flavor to it, and then it keeps our fondant sticking. Because fondant doesn't stick to anything by itself. You have to stick it. On a cake, we put on a layer of boiled apricot or a layer of buttercream. Americans use buttercream. Your English and Australians use the boiled apricot. You can also use piping gel, which is a flavorless, sticky stuff. But it doesn't stick by itself. It will fall off of things if you don't attach it. Are you guys just about ready to move to the poinsettia petals? Okay, the poinsettia petals I'm going to do a little bit differently. Get that one.
So we have another question from an audience member who's in the UK,
Okay.
and he's asking if there's a light version of fondant for those of us who are concerned about our weight.
Wrong class.
Sorry. There is a company in the US who has just come out with a sugar-free powdered sugar that I am in the process of doing some research with. I've made a buttercream icing with it. It's a little grainy. I have not tried a fondant with it yet. I'm hoping that I have enough left from what they sent me to work with to try it. So there is hope on the horizon. But it's a lot of sugar. I mean, we're talking, 3-4 pounds of sugar in a single formula. Yeah. And I'm trying to think pounds, that would be how many grams? And yes, lost, sorry.
So Joiner Curve has a question. It says, here in the UK, we call them buns and biscuits, but is gum paste the same as they call marzipan?
No. Marzipan is an almond-based product with sugar mixed in it, and gum paste is sugar, egg whites, and gum. it's closer, it's almost closer to a pastillage. And almond paste is what the Europeans, the Australians, and English put underneath their fondant and royal icing. And they do that in order to cover the darkness of the fruitcake, keep it sealed. And the other thing that it's affordable over there. It's very expensive over here, so we don't use it as much over here. And it's not as well received over here. So we have people who hate almond paste. You know, you either hate it or you love it. There's no in between over here, unfortunately. I'm a lover, so I could slop almond paste on all kinds of stuff and be happy.
Yeah, Farood asked about royal icing and whether you ever use royal icing for decorating.
I do. It gets hard as a rock. It's great at Christmas time for building our gingerbread houses. We can do a lot of flowers and stuff. We don't use it the same way they do in England by covering our wedding cakes and that sort of thing. We don't do it that way. Ours is buttercream and now the fondant. Yep. I actually have a book out on color flow, multi-dimensional color flow, which is based on royal icing. So yeah, I've worked with royal icing a lot over the years. And I developed that technique after I had my first child and realized I couldn't focus on anything for more than maybe 5 minutes at a time. So that particular technique is one of those things that you can work 5, 10, 15 minutes on or walk away from it if you have to. Okay, now I'm going to start the poinsettia leaves, and these are going to be a little bit different. Very similar to what we've just done. I got a fuzz in there, pull that out. I told you it would tell me if I had fuzz. And this time, instead of veining it with the palette knife or the veiner, I'm going to create it the same way. I'm going to crush it, and then this time what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a center vein by pinching it on each side with my thumb and finger to cause a little vein, and then a little lumpiness on the outside edge of that petal, and then I have to come back in and form a point on it. I'm going to stretch it and pull it out a little bit. So I got quite a large petal on that one. And then I'll go ahead and give it that fold and then let it drip over one of the edges.
Can you demonstrate that again?
You betcha. Mm-hmm. So I want to roll it. First of all, I have to knead it a little more. It's under kneaded. You can, once you start working with this for a while, you'll be able to tell when it's under kneaded and over kneaded. Okay, so make that point, press it, okay, and try to get it thin as you can, and then I'm going to come back with my finger and thumb and just press on the edges to thin the edges and cause that center to look like a vein. And years ago when we were first taught how to make the fancy gum paste flowers, they didn't really have any cutters. And we had to do this with every petal. Now we have all kinds of fancy cutters and tools. We don't have to. Okay, did that help? You got it? Want me to do it again?
One more time.
7 or 8, 9 times? Okay.
Well, you're a pro. You're a pro at this. I'm watching it unfold going, wow.
So let's get our ball. Let's give it a little point, press it. Then I'm going to come again, finger and thumb. And now I'm getting a little sticky, so where did I put my little cornstarch puff? I have a little cornstarch puff I put someplace. I hit it good. It's not a pretty one, so I hit it. I did a good job of it. I'm just going to pinch it like this. It just adds a little interest to that petal as opposed to being flat and kind of dull. And I've ruined my point, so I'm going to pull one out. Ta-da. Now poinsettias, the cool thing about poinsettias is that's not really their flower, that's not the flower. Those are leaves that have just changed color around the flower, which is actually little tiny yellow green things in the center. So you can have all kinds of shapes and sizes, and There's no set, 7 petals. A lot of flowers you have exactly 6 petals, exactly 7 petals. Poinsettias are not like that. They're very free fall. They're free-spirited little things.
I have 2 questions.
Okay.
So, let's see, I just forgot one of them.
A senior moment, and you're not even old.
Exactly. So, if you're doing it in advance, how would you recommend storing it?
Clean and dry.
So, would you put it like on wax paper and throw it in the fridge, or?
No, you don't want to put them in the fridge. Your fridge is actually quite wet. If you just left it on your counter and put wax paper over the top of it so that dust doesn't fall on it. Generally speaking, bugs don't come to this. I say generally speaking, then of course a fly will fly in and land on it. So it's not going to attract insects. You know what I'm saying? It shouldn't. It might in some parts attract ants. I should take that back. The point is, though, is you want to have it be clean and dry. China hutches are a great place to store things. If you're not using your oven, a lot of times when my oven is turned off, I have a huge deck oven. I store a lot of my stuff like this in the oven because I can close the door. It's dry. It's clean. They can dry in there some more. You just have to know not to turn the oven on. I have glass doors so I can see, but...
If you were doing this for you for like a giant cake, would you have used your pasta maker and then cut these out, or would you have done each individually like you're doing now?
Well, I probably would have used my pasta maker and used my poinsettia cutters. I have beautiful poinsettia cutters. So, yeah. And I would have been cutting out hundreds and hundreds of petals, yeah.
Lucinda, Elise would like to know, is it safe to use raw egg whites in the fondant, or is it safer to use meringue powder?
I prefer to use the meringue powder for safety purposes, then we're not dealing with any salmonella poisoning issues, especially because we don't do anything to cook this. The hottest it gets is melting our gelatin. I have a real, salmonella poisoning with eggs is a real issue, especially in the States. If you are to use a raw egg, because that's what you have and you don't have meringue powder or access to it, be sure and wash the egg before you crack it. Because a lot of times the salmonella poisoning is not so much with the egg white inside, it's the germs and bacteria on the outside of the egg. So if you wash the egg, little warm soapy water. I wouldn't get it too hot because you don't want to be starting to cook it, but I would do that first and then use the egg white. And then I wouldn't worry.
Great, thank you.
You're welcome.
And I'm going to cut in with a public service announcement and just want to let everyone out there know that we are posting in the next few minutes a PDF with all the links and recipes that will be on the course page, and of course you will need to enroll in this class first, and once you enroll you'll be able to get to the course page and set yourself up with all these recipes and links. So thanks for being patient. It should be just a few more minutes.
Recipes and links. The recipes are worth signing in for, guys. Like I said, the one white cake recipe, that was worth the price of the book. So. The cool thing about that white recipe, I haven't worked it out yet with the chocolate. I haven't put any effort into it lately, but it makes, I mean, if you do a mango or a peach or a raspberry or anything that you want to stir into it and make it a different flavored orange cake, it comes out beautiful every time. And I've had, when I was teaching it at the college, I had students doing it and trying different things. And students can pretty well mess something up pretty good. So I figure if a student can make it turn out, you know it's a good one.
Now that you were talking about salmonella, the egg cartons that
Yes.
you're using, are those from like real eggs, or is that from like a supply store or something?
You can get them from a supply store.
Okay,
Yeah.
all right. And then I also wanted to ask, someone else had asked about the pasta machine, if they came in different sizes, because they were having a hard time getting theirs to open up wide enough to take the fondant. So do you smush it down a fair amount before you
I
run it
kind
through
of
there?
smush mine down a little
Okay.
bit before I
All
put
right.
it in. And they also sell sheeters that are made just for doing fondant. The sheeters are commercial grade, and I think they're about $6,000 or $8,000. So my pasta machine's about $10 at a garage sale.
Right. Okay.
45 if I buy it new. So
Okay.
yeah. I want a sheeter. So if anybody wants to get me a Christmas gift, there you go.
We did have a question about this salmonella issue again. You are okay using the egg cartons? You're not worried about that? Oh, so sorry. Yeah. My bad. Sorry, I'm multitasking.
Pay attention. Pay attention.
The other thing that works really well with this type of cartons are apple crates or any other type of fruit.
Yeah, or like oranges and things like
yeah.
that. Yeah, I know exactly.
Yeah,
what you're
because they
talking about.
pack those, you know, and you can get them. They're easy to get. And usually if you ask the right person, they sometimes just hand you a handful and say, here you go. And you go, thank you. You have to be near a chicken farm, though. I'm trying to make as many poinsettia petals as I can because I'd like to do not only the cupcake but also the cookie. And if you'll also notice as you're looking at what I have here is I have some color that I've dusted onto the inside. And I'm going to wait until that's a little closer to dry. Anytime you color with a dust or a powder, it's best if you let it dry a little bit. So then it goes on smoother. Yeah?
So I have a question. How many petals of the poinsettia should we be making, and then
About
should
100.
They be about 100? Sweet. No, should they be like different sizes? I mean,
Yeah,
should we
you
have
can make them
small ones,
different.
Or should we have big ones? Because I noticed on your cupcake in the picture, it looks like it's multi-layered from my point of view.
It is multi-layered, and I do have smaller petals on the inside. So you want some various shapes, and that's kind of the fun thing about poinsettias is that they're all different sizes, and you can use, I said 100, I was kind of joking. You want to think anywhere from about 5 to 6 minimum, up to 9 or 10 even, depending on the size of your cupcake and your petals and your cookie and all that sort of thing. I used to work in a lot of miniature, created a lot of things in miniature, and one of the things I've discovered is that if I work bigger, guess what? I don't have as much work. So I have a tendency to make my petals a little larger now.
Quick question, kind of going back a little bit. A couple of people have asked about applying the fondant using water.
To what surface?
To a cake or a cookie. The question is, does it really work? Because I guess they've heard it, but they're not sure that it actually works.
Well, water is good for applying fondant to fondant. As far as applying it to a cake surface, if I have a buttercream underneath and it's been sitting someplace and got a little crusty, I could spray a little light dusting of water on it, and that would help it stick. To put it on my cookie, no.
Okay.
You'd be better off putting a little honey on your cookie, even a little strawberry or raspberry jam.
Right, something that's a little
Something
sticky.
a little sticky, a little moist, yeah.
Okay, perfect, thank you.
And Lucinda, going back to the salmonella question again, I just want to let you know that it was asked by your neighbor, Lily in Utah, who said that she just wanted to harass you, and she's laughing out. She's laughing out loud.
Tell Lily I love her and miss her. Lily, I miss you. And I'm still mad that you moved. I got a really, really good friend, and we had lots in common, and we spent time together, and then she moved to Utah.
How often do you ask your friends to come over and help with the making of the leaves.
You know, I rarely ask anybody. I just, and I have a lot of people that say, oh, let me come over and, you know, watch. No, I'm kind of that lone ranger. I do a lot of work at weird hours. It's not uncommon for me to be up until midnight working on something. And I work in my garage. I used to have a big fancy bakery, and I worked all the time by myself there. And then I no longer have my bakery. Divorces are wonderful. So now I have a little tiny house. I have the smallest kitchen I've ever owned in my entire life, including when I lived in apartments. And I have a wonderful husband now who is building me this nice work area out in my garage. So now I'm out in my garage in the cold.
Well, you gotta put some heat in there somehow.
It's coming.
Yeah, okay, over time.
It's called insulation first.
Right, yes.
Lily says she misses you too.
Aw. She was harassing me, gosh. I probably have other friends watching me too.
Question from Brown Sugar. Speaking of meringue powder, I have some that's hardened. Is there a way to get it back to its powdery state?
Has it changed color?
I will wait for a response.
Okay, I was going to say, if it's changed color, it may not be worthy. If it's not, I would suggest putting it into a blender or a grinder and seeing if she can blend it back into a powder state.
They say no.
Yeah, I would. Yeah, try the blender then. See if she can blend it back that way. That's how they make powdered sugar. They just take granulated sugar and then grind it. And in the big companies that make powdered sugar, this is what they do. It's so cool. I used to work for a company. I know how they do it. They bring in the train load of granulated sugar. They load it into their hoppers, and they put it through their grinder, and they have a big fan that blows. And when the sugar gets to a certain level, it blows out into a funnel. And that's how they make powdered sugar.
That's cool.
Yeah.
Hey, speaking of sugar, what's your opinion on granulated sugar versus superfine sugar for your baking needs?
I think they both work, but I think that superfine is awesome for things like cookies and cakes. I don't think it's absolutely necessary to have superfine. I think granulated's fine. If I'm making a Swiss buttercream that starts with the granulated sugar, it doesn't matter because, quite frankly, it's going to be cooked and melted down, so it makes no difference. I like a superfine sugar for things like shortbread. It's just more elegant. But then, of course, there's other types of cookies where you have the super coarse sugar that makes it even more interesting. So there's all kinds of fun things about sugar. I will say this about sugar, though. I prefer cane sugar over beet sugar. Beet sugar, especially when we're working with it like this or in buttercream, it has a stretch, and you cannot get your product to work as well if you're using a beet sugar. You can tell in the end in what you're working with. It just feels different. You don't even have to see the label. You can just tell. Okay, so now I've gotten out my green, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to use my pasta machine now, okay? And I'm starting with it at 1, and I just rolled in what looks like, oh, red, nice. Picked out. Okay. Now these are working tools, so if in camera you can see the grunge on it, sorry, I did wash it, but you know. And I start with the thickest, so I wanted it at the 1, and I'm going to work until about number 4. I don't want to go too thin because then I'm got something that's just too thin. So 4 is good, 3, 4 is good for this sort of thing. And what I'm going to do now is, I did bring this out, I'm going to cut some holly. Now these particular cutters, and I've put some on everybody's table, these are called PME cutters, and here's what's so awesome about them. First I'm going to cut with it, and then I'm going to push down, and I'm going to vein it, and then I'm going to kind of wiggle it again, and then I'm going to push out on that, and it pops that out so that I have a nice veined little holly leaf. And I'm going to make about 9 of them like this. And my poor students, I didn't provide them with pasta machines. They're going to have little rolling pins. They're going to have to roll. They're going to build arm muscles today. Tomorrow they're going to call me and say, my arms hurt so bad. Yeah.
If you're rolling it, do you prepare the surface in any particular way?
You can put a little bit of shortening on your surface so it doesn't stick, or you can even put a little bit of the cornstarch on your surface, either one, or even powdered sugar. Anytime, and especially I should tell you ladies, I made this fondant fairly soft because my hands are much stronger than yours. So I made it a little on the soft side so you'll be able to work with it. The other thing that I have going on right now is I have a really sore elbow. I'm getting that carpal tunnel. It's now moved up to my elbow, and so a lot of times when I'm kneading, it's like, okay, I've reached the point where I have to be done. And I always tell people, take care of your body. Don't make your stuff too stiff or too hard, because if you're in a, you know, in my situation, this is a living. And I can't be destroying my hands and my arms. So take care of yourself. Don't work with stuff that's hard, too heavy, too hard, too tough. Yes?
I have a question. So when you're rolling out the fondant, how thick should it be, or how thin should it be, or
You want
how
it,
do you know?
You want it fairly thin, okay? You don't want it so thin you can see through it. But it's maybe a 1/16, maybe a little less.
Could you repeat the name of that thing you're using to cut?
It's a PME, I'll hold it here. It's a PME holly cutter, and they come in a set of three different sizes.
So the letters PME? Okay.
And that's something Global Sugar Art also carries.
Okay.
I love PME tips.
Okay.
Their cutters are fun. They also have a snowflake cutter I'll be showing you later too. That's pretty awesome. I tried not to have too many tools for you to have to invest in. And I always say tools, toys. I mean, yeah. I mean, you can do this without it, but it's a little more fun if you have some tools, the right toys.
Jennifer would like to know, at Global Sugar Art, will you also find the high-quality clear vanilla extract that you were talking about, or can you have recommendations for that?
I use Watkins. Cook's is, I think Cook's is okay, but yeah, they'll have a clear vanilla that you can use. There's several out there. It's kind of a personal preference. I think you need to shop around until you find a clear vanilla that you like. How you guys doing? Your leaves are sticky. Spatula underneath.
And how about surfaces? Wood, marble, what's your favorite general that you'll like to work on?
Flat and clean.
Flat and clean?
Yeah. Stainless steel is nice, but stainless steel will often give you a gray to your product. Wood, of course, you have the issue with the grains of the wood. Your well-used baker's bench will be fine. It just needs to be clean and flat.
So like if you have granite or something
All
like that, that's really,
yeah,
really nice.
all that works, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Mm-hmm. Not that I do right now, but you know.
Yeah.
A friend of mine does.
I know people who do, right? Yeah.
Exactly.
You want it to be clean and flat. You don't want to have too many ridges and that sort of thing, because some of those granites are tile, and then you have the cuts in the surface, so like that shows.
And Lavina wanted to know, going back a little ways, when you use paper liners, do you also use the muffin pans, or can you put them on a flat cookie sheet?
No, those paper liners have to have a muffin tin. Yeah, and you can use a tin, or you can use the. I want to say it's not latex. What's the ones that are flexible? Silicone. Thank you. Or you can use the silicone. They work either way. Okay, so now what I've done while you guys are continuing to make your leaves is I've taken some yellow and some of the green and I've mixed it into a lime green. I also call this Lucinda green because I like it. I actually iced an entire wedding cake in this lime green and decorated it with 5-petal flowers, little Austin Power type of flowers. And it was published in American Cake Decorating several years ago. And the food color companies had so many requests for this color that they called it Lucinda Green and developed a color just for me. Aww. Yeah. I got a free jar of color out of it. Yep. Don't even have enough to buy coffee with that one. Okay, and I've rolled it out to a 3. I got a little air bubble there. I'm not going to fret or panic at all about it. I'm going to take my round cookie cutters that I've given everybody a set to have. And if you have round cookie cutters or round cutters, perfect. If you don't sweat it. Find a glass that's the right size and use that as your cutter. Okay. Mine are used, sticky. I'll just wipe that off here. And what I want to do is I want to take, let's use a gold, because that's kind of pretty. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my little cupcake, and I want to have it be much larger than what my cupcake is. That's a little on the large side. So let's try this one. Okay, so I have it much larger, because I'm going to build up a mound of icing on top of my cupcake, and then I'm going to put the fondant on top of it. And I want it to come down enough to cover my edge so that that keeps my cupcake moist. And they were moist when I baked them a few days ago. Now they're getting a little dry. Okay, then what I've done is I want to talk real quick about parchment papers and bags, okay? So I have lots of options. These are parchment paper triangles, and we have to fold those into parchment paper bags, okay? And I'll show you how to do that. I like the parchment paper because it doesn't transfer the heat. If you have hot hands, it doesn't transfer the heat as easily. When I'm done with it, I squish out my extra icing and I throw it away. I'm done. I don't have to clean. Then we have what's called decorating bags, and these are soft and pliable. They come in various sizes. They work great. You have to cut them. When you get them, you have to cut them so that your tip or coupler will work on it, and you have to have a coupler in it, which I also gave myself a coupler. Yeah, it's here someplace. I gave all my students a coupler. Maybe I didn't give myself one. That's okay. So we'll have to put a coupler in that in order to use it. The advantage to that is, of course, is that it's reusable, but it's easy to work with because it's soft and pliable, so you can just, work with it that way. The disadvantage, though, is it transfers heat fairly easily, so if you have nice warm hands, that's going to be an issue, okay? And last but not least are the disposable decorating bags. Now, the thing about the disposable decorating bags, again, they're disposable. So when we're done, we can throw them away. They're also firm enough that if you're on a budget, you can wash them and reuse them a few times before you have to chuck them. The disadvantage is that they transfer heat really easy. So if you have hot hands, you really need to be thinking about going with just parchment paper, okay? The other disadvantage to the disposable plastic bags is the fact that they have stretch and give. They were not developed for piping buttercream. They were developed for piping chocolate or whipped cream. So they're not supposed to be for buttercream. For what we're doing today, it's going to be just fine. It would not be a problem at all. And again, I can put my tip directly in here. When I was pulling this off the roll, I gave a little tear, so I'd have to be careful and make sure that I had a coupler in here so that I wouldn't have a spot where it would break or ooze out of the end or something before I wanted it to. The other thing about these are huge. This is a really big bag. And so one of the tricks that you can do is rather than using the whole bag is you can just cut it off. And then you have a bag that's more appropriate size. So those are the types of bags. I use the disposables mostly for class and for my students because they're clean, they're easy for the students to use, they can throw them away. But I don't usually use them. They're not, I do a lot of piping and they're too stretchy for me. I use a lot of parchment paper. Okay, so on our parchment paper, I'm going to show you the hardest part of doing this parchment paper, okay guys? How to fold it. So, I'm going to hold it with the point down. Can you guys all see? Everybody can see? Okay. I'm going to take one corner and I'm going to bring it down to the center corner. And just as I get down there, it's going to do a back flip. Woohoo, back flip. So now I have a cone. Now I'm going to take the other corner, I'm going to wrap it around the back so that all the corners are down in one portion, the first corner. Now the trick here is that get my hands wet so if I pull the corners this way to tighten up this cone, all it's going to do is make my cone smaller. It's not going to tighten it up, and I want to tighten up that point right up there. So the way to do that is, rather than pulling those corners in, is I'm going to pull them down simultaneously. If I pull them down, I tighten up that point to a closed point. In pastry school, we will pour water in these to see if they hold water. They should hold water. And then once I have it, a single loop. I don't want to have one be smaller than the other. I don't want to have the inside one be bigger than the outside and it wants to be one continuous loop. At that point, I am then going to fold or tear. I am not going to staple, tape, paper clip. No, that's very bad. If you fold it, give a little twist. Some bakers or pastry people like to give a little tear. I think it's too much work. I don't do that. As long as I fold it and give a little bend, it's good to go, okay? This is a commercial size. I want to say these are about 16-inch is what they're called, the commercial size, so this is a pretty big cone. I generally split them in half and then make smaller cones, okay?
Hi, Lucinda, we have a couple of requests. Can you show that folding again, please?
I knew that was going to come. So what I want to do this time, because I brought it up, I'm going to tear the parchment paper in half, so I'm not doing one large one. And you can either just tear these or you can get a knife and cut a pile of them. This was one of the things that when I'd get my parchment papers in, I'd have a kid stand and punch holes in one corner so I could hang them on a hook. And then when I was working with them, I'd just pull it off. That's a good kid job. Okay, so we've got that point down. I'm going to bring it over. Then we're going to flip. Then wrap it around the back. So now we have it wrapped. It's in that cone. That's the hardest part. It's like the big Fig Newton. We just got that done. Okay. Then I'll just go ahead and pull it down in the center and fold. No paper clips, no tape, no foreign objects in here. You would be amazed at what can come out of your bag onto your surface. I have seen incredible things come out of students' bags. Yeah. One lady had a piece of plastic this long that was all the way on her borders, and she came out one little tick at the end. She goes, "What's this?" And she goes like this, and that much plastic came off the cake. I was like, and you could not tell. Yeah. So So now we've got a couple of these, and I've filled one of them. And here's the thing, when you fill a bag, you only want to fill it about 2/3. You don't want to fill it all the way. So I have one already filled, and when I fill this, I'm going to fill it 2/3, and then I'm going to do it this way. I'm going to fold it, fold in each side, and then roll it so that that seam is rolling in, okay? And then when I hold it, I'm going to hold it right here between my thumb and finger so that it doesn't unspin. That's part of it. And then I'm going to apply pressure with my whole hand. I'm not holding it like this. I have no pressure control. And then somebody's going to have to unlock your car door so you can drive home because you won't have any way to undo your hand. So you want to hold it with your whole hand and squeeze with your whole hand. That gives you more pressure control. And it's all about the pressure control. There's my coupler. I found it. Okay. So here's what's going to happen with the coupler. And the first thing I'm going to do is, this bag is too big, so I'm going to take my scissors and cut off a few inches of it. Wasn't that slick? I have a little garbage bag there. You always fold down a cuff on these bags so that you have that top that you can keep clean and not gooky. And then when you fill it, you hold it like this with your hand here. You take your spatula. Okay. Coupler, 2 parts. Take the outside part off. I have to say that because guess what? I've seen people not do that. How do you get the tip to stick on now? I take the large part and I put it down into my bag, and you can see. This is why I'm doing it on this bag, so you can see what I'm doing. Isn't that cool? It's like a glass. Now, the next trick is I'm going to take that outside coupler and I'm just going to put it right on the outside, go ahead and screw it into place. If I'm doing this with one of my new decorating bags, and this is why I brought this one, at this point where this is, I would mark that with a pen and then take it off and then cut it and then put it back on. And when you do these bags, when you cut them the first time, always cut less because they do stretch when you put that coupler in, and it's really easy to ruin a brand new bag by cutting too much off. And you only do that a couple of times or once before you go. Not a good plan. If this were parchment, I could just tear this off. So I can use a coupler on parchment, on my featherweight bags, on my decorating bags, any bag, you can use your couplers. But you don't have to use it on every bag. I don't have to use it on every parchment paper. I can just dump it in sometimes. Okay, so I've cut off that excess plastic. That allows me the ability to take my tip and just put it right on the outside and attach it to the surface. So the advantage to having your coupler on your decorating bag is that I can change tips, which today we're going to pretty much be using a standard tip, but just in case you needed to change. And that's ready to go. Any questions?
We're just using the round tip?
Yep, we're just using the round tip today.
Question from earlier, Jennifer wanted to know if you had a recommendation for a brand of meringue powder.
Meringue powder is pretty much meringue powder. I will say this, if she buys it commercially, a lot of the meringue powders in the big buckets, so like when I buy my meringue powder, I buy a 5-pound bucket. Most people buy a little 8-ounce jar, okay? I discovered that when I was getting towards the end of my bucket, I was having issues with it. And what I was discovering is that the sugar that was mixed in with it had kind of settled to the bottom, so mostly what I was using was sugar and not meringue. So if she gets a commercial grade, she either needs to fluff it up every once in a while and keep the sugar mixed in, or when she gets to a certain level, just dump it, because it's mostly sugar. So, and I don't think she'd have that problem using an 8-ounce jar. I've never run into that issue. That was my big 5-pound bucket that was an issue. Okay, how you ladies doing? Awesome, awesome? Okay, so what I want to do now, throw my tip on the floor. I'll leave it there. Have a backup tip. It's okay. So to do my cupcake, I chose a larger cutter, right? And then I can just cut a circle. And I did, oh, mine was sticking to the surface too. Okay, there we go. So I have that nice surface. So then what I want to do with my bag, and I have my bag all filled, and you can see pink and red stain your bags, but not your icing, thank goodness. I'm just going to build up a nice little swirl of icing here. I don't want to take it all the way out to the edge because when I put on my fondant, it's going to try to put it on centered. So what I want to do then is just attach it. I didn't get it centered. Stretch and pull it so it's centered. And now I have a surface that's all set to decorate. Okay, and I'm just going to let those sit there. In the meantime, I'm going to move this out of the way because I want those petals to sit and dry for a few more minutes, okay?
Lucinda, we've had a couple of questions out there about making fondant with marshmallows. Can you comment on that?
I don't like it. I don't think it works really well. I know that there are a lot of people that like it. I think it gets too stiff and too hard, and a lot of people like it because of the flavor, but if you're enjoying working with it, I say go for it. I personally, it gets too hard and stiff to work with, and yeah, that's been my experience with it. But I do know that a lot of people really enjoy it. So if you enjoy it, go for it. That's the cool thing about cake decorating or cookie making or baking and any of that sort of stuff. I mean, once you get your basic formula down, that's the science. The rest of it's all art, and we're not performing brain surgery, so there's no hard and fast rules as far as you can and can't do this or that. As long as you're making something work and you're liking it, go for it.
Terrific. And along those same lines, Rick D. Smith would like to know, if you're just starting out in fondant, what tools are the absolute must-haves?
I would say a ball tool, some good rolling pins or rolling like a pasta machine, and some good brushes are the absolute must-haves, I think. The rest of them are, you can add to, and they're toys. Yeah. And there are a lot of tools and a lot of things out there. There's a lot that you will use and many that you will never occupy once you purchase. Yeah. Did that help? Okay.
Lucinda,
Yes.
is this going to stick to the cupcake without having put anything under it?
You would need to put your buttercream underneath.
Oh, the buttercream goes under.
Okay. Kathy, keep her up, would you? Yeah. Now, if you'll notice, in order for mine to get nice and smooth, I used the palm of my hand. If I use my fingers, it's going to have little bumps and ridges in it. Can you kind of see how that works? If I use the palm of my hand and kind of love and caress it, and I know this sounds like a horrible thing to say, but it should feel kind of like a baby's bottom. Nice and soft and smooth. Okay? That's a horrible thing to say. Ooh, it should feel like a baby's bottom. Ugh. Eat up. How you guys doing?
Good.
Okay, okay. I'm going to keep pushing you here.
Lucinda, Brown Sugar had a question. If you know if there are any specific requirements for the gold and silver liners to make them oven-proof?
For the gold and silver liners to make them oven-proof?
Yeah, can they be used in the oven?
Oh yeah, you bake right in them.
Oh, great.
Yeah, they're made to do that.
Thank you.
My cupcakes actually bake higher in the gold and silver lined ones than they do in the paper. So they bake a little better. I'm going to do some tree-shaped cookies now is what I'm going to do. I'm going to kind of bounce around. I know that's a little confusing, but I'm still kind of waiting for these things to set up a little bit before I get too far involved. So what I want to do is do some of the tree ones. And I had fun with my trees. I did one that's all white, and I was thinking you could be, real stylistic about it, have an all white. Stepped on my tip now. Have an all white cookie tray and all the decorations being white. I thought that'd be real chic, chic. And then in would come your kid and go, "How come they're all white, Mom?" Because I saw in a magazine, it looked cool.
You talked earlier about baking on parchment. Do you ever use a Silpat?
Silpads are nice too. I use full sheet pans, and so I have a few Silpads, but normally I'm loading up 7 or 8 trays at a time. It's just easier for the parchment. The thing I like about the parchment too is that I will bake all day using the same parchment, and if I'm baking the next day, I could even use it the next day. You can use it for quite a while before you really have to chuck them. If they start to stink, chuck them. If they get too much burnt sugar on them, chuck them, Okay, so what I'm going to do I have this whole box of toys here. Where's my tree? Oh, there it is. I was looking for a metal cutter. Forgot what I was. So you can see I use plastic, I use metal, I use plain plastic, whatever. I just am a whatever. If it gets what I want, I'm happy. And again, for these, I just literally, does it get any simpler than this? Just cut them out. And I only have one, so when you guys get to your trees, we'll have to share. So I'll put that over here, get my cookie. And what I'm going to do to pipe on for my cookie now, I'm not piping on mass quantities because I don't want the icing to squish out the sides. So I'm just going to kind of give a little pipe down the center. Let's rock it back and forth. Put my fondant on. Can you guys see how that's looking?
Actually, your head's in the way.
There, now we.
Okay. I'm glad I asked. Yeah, your hair looks fabulous. Thank you. So I just used exactly the same cutter that I used on the cookie. And it gives it a nice, clean, sharp, professional look. Makes it look like I know what I'm doing.
Well, you're doing that. You do look like you know what you're doing.
Tisa wanted to know in the PDF that we're going to be providing with recipes, whether you're including your buttercream recipe.
My buttercream recipe is, I have a standard buttercream recipe that I've included, yes. It's not my recipe, but it's a recipe. It's a good one, but not as good as my recipe.
Which, of course, is I'm taking it secret.
I have been sharing that with people who are buying my Beautiful Borders DVD. So if you buy the DVD, it comes with the DVD. Yep.
And do you go full sugar ball stage? Am I asking that right? I've made it a couple times.
The standard American buttercream is mostly butter, shortening, and sugar. What you're talking about is an Italian buttercream that you make a hot syrup as the base. Yep. And don't ask me to remember what temperature it comes to. You normally have a thermometer in my sleeve, and I'm looking to go, I'm reaching it, you know.
And for yours, you make the standard American as opposed to the Italian?
Yeah. I use an American base. I like the American base because I can make all my icing on Monday and have it ready to go. And then when I'm doing my cake orders on Thursday, Friday, and Saturdays, it's all set to go. I don't have to try to revamp it or any of that sort of thing. Your Italians and your French and your Swiss, you pretty much have to make them as you use them. There's some tricks to revamping it, includes blow torches. And I don't have time when I'm dealing with, 50 pounds of stuff at a time. It's mostly business.
Can I borrow your?
Yep.
I'll get for you.
I was going to say, pass it around.
So another question, you use things like glittery powders.
Oh, yeah.
Do you kind of dust those on like with a brush or something?
Yes.
Or do you mix it with a fondant?
It doesn't do much to mix any of that stuff with the fondant. It's pretty well eaten up.
Okay.
You need to brush it on afterwards, and I brush it on with art brushes.
Right.
Some of the things you can brush on, like your golds and your silvers, you want to brush on when they are dry. It goes on a little better. And if you mix it with like vegetable oil, some people like to mix it with lemon extract because there's more oil in the lemon extract. I find it gets chunky, and then of course I've added that incredibly lemon extract onto everything, yeah. And so I have an issue with that. I don't do that. I use vegetable oil, glides on like glass, goes a lot further. The only disadvantage is if I'm creating something that needs to sit around for months, it does discolor with time.
Okay.
And when I say months, I mean months. It's not, next week it's going to discolor.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you.
No problem.